Hi there, you're listening to Fault Summits, a history podcast about the American West. I am Mason Orlando, and today with me is the lovely Jessley
Hello, lovely.
and the scrappy Marcelo Aguilar.
Howdy, everybody. Scrappy, huh?
Absolutely.
Scrappy. Always scrappy.
Oh, man. Okay, well, I'll take it.
Excellent. How are we all feeling tonight?
I'm feeling scrappy now that you mention it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Feel like a fresh cut of scrapple over here.
Yeah. Scrapple.
You guys ever heard of that stuff? Scrapple?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Man, that is some good, really grimy shit. Oh boy, it's awesome.
I haven't tried it, but as soon as I realized what was in it, I immediately lost interest. But I will believe the people that say that it's good.
There's an episode of The Wire where like one of the characters is like on a
That's
gnarly like
dark.
hungover bender, and he starts like he goes to a diner and like I think he's just had an accident or something, and the first thing he orders is like scrapple and eggs, and that basically explains like the situation that scrapple is peak at.
Yeah, like Scrapple is
Oh,
like
gotcha.
it's it's like
It's not for me.
Yeah, no, it's really not for humans, but it's there.
it's like Spam's cousin that did a lot of time in jail,
It's
you know?
That's a good way to
it's
put it.
corner store spam. Well, I think the phrase for it or the saying for it is it's everything but the squeal. Yeah, that's what it says on the
That's
packaging.
right. That's right. That's disgusting.
Anyways, are we
Oh,
talking about Scrapple today or
I prefer my mechanically separated meat in Slim Jim form. Thank you very much.
straight up? Yep.
All right. So today we are it's been about a year since we started this podcast, and our first
Wow,
episode was,
it's been a year already?
yep.
Do 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 do.
And, you know, first episode was about Slab City. And, we talked a little bit about Salvation Mountain. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about its creator, Leonard Knight. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and be talking about today. I do have some pictures, and I'm kind of excited about this because most of them were taken from me over the course of like a decade and a half. So yeah, it should
Cool.
be interesting, at least
Wow.
to me.
I feel like we've definitely grown since that episode.
Especially as a cast.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Today's story is about Leonard Knight, the man who built Salvation Mountain, a 50-foot immersive art project that greets you as you enter Slab City, the last free place on Earth, some have coined it. Our first episode was actually about that for this podcast, so if you want to go ahead and listen to it, we'll go ahead and put a link in the notes. In most pictures you come across, you'll see Leonard as a kind looking man that has clearly spent his life outside, sporting gray hair, a straw hat, with some paint covered clothing. He looked and was truly a free spirit. He was a man that would spend nearly half his life living and working in the desert on his monument to God's love. So, yeah, that's Leonard Knight. That's the way I remember him when I met him.
He looks like a very kind man. He looks like he has a very kind soul in his eyes.
Yeah, he wasn't there when we visited, but I remember going to that area that was like kind of blocked off. But yeah, I remember that. The whole place had a really positive energy to it for whoever it was that curated it.
Right, and we'll actually get into them a little bit later here. But so we're just gonna go ahead and talk about his life and motivations for creating this beautiful work of art. So we don't have a lot of early pictures of Leonard, but he was born on November 1st, 1939, and grew up on his family farm in Shelburne, Virginia, which is a small town outside Burlington, Virginia. So that's the only picture of this town in Virginia, Shelburne, I could find.
Oh,
Looks
wow.
nice, yeah. Um,
I
Also,
imagine it's a small town.
so this is Salvation Mountain. Should have said that in the beginning.
I think it lets you know.
And oh,
It's the cart of salvation.
who is
Yeah,
that?
that looks like one of those called illegals. No,
Eh,
it's me. It's me.
Oh my gosh.
I assure you, I have documents. Yeah, no, that's yeah, that was from our trip when we went out there.
Are you wearing something over your face?
Yeah, it's during a weird time. Uh,
I mean, if nothing else, it's not a bad idea to cover your face from like if the wind is blowing up the sand or something.
I think maybe that's what I was doing. I was also it was like this Mayan mask, so there was a little extra oomph in walking around with it on. So I don't know. It was yeah, when was this? May 2020? 2021?
2021, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this was yeah,
I dig
it's
it.
it's a good time. It was my first time ever seeing the mountain. It really I didn't get to meet Leonard, but it was really something to see in person. And like I said, it was I don't know, there was a very calming energy about it, and like there was clearly like respect of the people who came to see it and like admire it. Yeah, it was a cool thing to see in person.
Hell yeah, I'm glad we could facilitate that. That was a fun trip.
Yeah. The other part that's really nice about it is that it is such a like striking, like lovely, welcoming thing. And then like the next thing you see is like Slab City. It really adds a nice like sweet and salty mixture there. It's like there's an appreciation in that contrast, I think.
Not sure what you mean, but we'll
Yeah,
talk
well,
about it later. How about?
we'll get into that later.
So, he was born on November 1st, 31 in Shelburne, Virginia. I already went over that. He and his five siblings helped their parents work the land. Leonard remembers there being too much work and not enough play. Why does that sound familiar?
Hmm.
He went to one room school until he was old enough for the slightly bigger Shelburne High School, and it had 80 or so students. He
Oh,
really,
wow.
yeah.
Oh,
So
quite a
like
lot.
small town, small town. He really didn't care for school as he was teased by the other kids and ended up dropping out sophomore year, finding work in a local factory. At 20, he was drafted into the Army and received tank mechanic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, after which he was sent over to Korea to serve.
Korea was that was I mean, I wasn't alive back then, but from the stories I've heard, it was a time.
Well, Leonard didn't see it because 10 days after his boots hit the soil in Korea, the conflict was over.
Oh,
Uh,
he did it. He fixed it.
yeah, no, he got there and they said, you know what, we're done.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
But he actually later achieved the rank of motor pool sergeant, which he didn't really care for because he had to boss other people around.
Wasn't a big authority guy.
No. So after being honorably discharged from the army, he went back to Vermont and found employment at a car uh, dealership's body shop. And that was until he found
Is that him?
no, that's just some guy in a body shop in the 50s.
Oh, I
But
imagined it had to have been a shop similar to that
he,
though.
he was I'm sure he did similar things in his shop
Yeah, fix the back end of a car.
with a
Yeah.
blowtorch, whatever he's doing.
Then Leonard went on a road trip in 1956, went across cross country to California, and he fell in love with San Diego, and he stayed in the area until the passing of his father brought him back to Vermont to care for his family. Once there, he taught himself guitar and gets good enough to give lessons for pay. So he's kind of just going around and teaching folks how to play guitar for money for a living. Um, in 1967, he's using his van to travel around and live in for work. Uh, we would call that today van life, but I think back then it was called drifting. Um, Back then, he ends up near San Diego in a place called Lemon Grove, where his religious sister lives. Now, according to Leonard himself, one morning he was hiding from his sister in said van, and it was parked in front of her house. And because she wouldn't stop preaching, he was kind of just away from her. However, it was in his van at 10:30 in the morning that Leonard felt compelled to repeat the sinner's prayer. Jesus, I am a sinner. Please come into my body and heart. This is when Leonard was touched by the Lord and accepted Jesus into his heart, and he left the van a saved man. Upon his arrival back in Vermont, he wanted to tell everyone about his experience, how others could be saved just like him. However, he found that the people running the churches in his hometown pushed back on this revelation. Undaunted, he looked for other ways to get his message out.
You mean that they
Hey,
didn't
Mason.
appreciate him driving around with a van that said
Yeah.
free salvation on it?
Hey, Mason.
What? What's up?
Um, so was he from Vermont or was he from Virginia? Because I think at the very beginning of the story you said Virginia, not Vermont.
Did I say? Did I say Virginia? Because he's from
I
Vermont. I apologize. I
Yeah,
apologize.
I think he said Virginia. So, but I'm sure you could go back and fix that later.
I mean, he was an old soul, you know. Maybe he was born in multiple places at once and then became one super being when he went
He's
to the
like
military.
two
He
souls
melt,
that merged into
yeah.
one.
He freaky Friday himself into one singular being.
That's not the plot of the movie, Marcelo.
Well, I mean,
No, he was from Vermont.
That's what I thought, or that's what I remembered. But when I heard you say Virginia, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
So a few years later, in 1970, a hot air balloon passed over Burlington, Vermont. Is it
Vermont.
Vermont? Is it Vermont?
Yes.
Okay, I'm all questioning myself. I apologize.
Oh,
Okay,
it's
it's
not.
so a
all
few
good.
so a few years later, in 1970, a hot air balloon passed over Burlington, Vermont, and Leonard noticed what a commotion it stirred up in town, and it gave him an idea. What if he had his own hot air balloon with the sinner's prayer on the side?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I'm pretty
okay.
sure I'm pretty sure that's not what he saw, but I would like to think that that's the balloon that he saw.
Okay. Yeah. He's like, I envision this in the air.
It
Um,
does say D. It says D Oleg on it. I don't know what that means.
that's not the part that I'm concerned about.
No, I understand, but yeah, that's a very interesting balloon.
That's a really odd Where's Waldo?
It's two-faced too. There's another one on the other side of the balloon.
Oh God. Okay, is the other one crying?
Waldo got dreads.
Yeah, so he kind of thought like, what if he had his own balloon with his own message? And so he thought it might be something worth pursuing. And as the years went by, Leonard kept the balloon idea in his head. Having learned the price point of a hot air balloon, though, he decided that he would need to build it himself. Sometime around 1980, he broke down in Nebraska. Although that is no one's idea of a good day, Leonard ended up staying there for some time and was actually gifted a sewing machine from some friends he made. Now, with the right tool, he began buying whatever fabric he could, and slowly, a colorful patchwork of secondhand material was starting to form a balloon with Leonard's shorter message in red on a field of white, God is love. After a few years, the project actually began to grow too large for him, and he wasn't able to maintain it properly. Much of the stitching would actually start to rot, and when he would go to repair that, By the time he was done with it, other stitch work would have rotted in the amount of time it took him to repair the first part. He was having a really hard time getting his balloon dream off the ground. In 1984, Leonard had found some work in Arizona, and he ended up taking a weekend trip with his boss to Slab City. Uh, and
Like you
you
do.
don't, yeah, and it's an unincorporated area, and it attracts RV loving retirees and folks looking to experience different lifestyles due to the ability to camp there, and you don't have to pay rent or fees. So, free. So he ends up liking the area's community and weather so much that he returned with his van and balloon and set up camp around the northern entrance to Slab City. He enlisted the help of some Slab City residents to repair and attempt to launch his balloon with his homemade inflating furnace. So sadly, after 14 years of planning, all the work he put in, Leonard had to face the reality that his balloon would never leave the ground. Although his first attempt to do so failed, he still was determined to create something in the area to spread the message and he gave himself a week to stay in Slab City to go ahead and build something that would, spread this message of God's love. What Leonard would do next would keep him working and living in Slab City for nearly the next 3 decades.
One of the things I can't help but think about is that of the things you want to be DIY, I feel like a hot air balloon is low on that list. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Like I get it. I get it. It's ingenuity, it's cool, it's all that, but like I think you'd want a professional hot air, you know?
Yeah.
I
But I
could
understand it sounds like he was really low on funds, so he tried to DIY it. I
Yeah,
totally
yeah, yeah.
get it.
I'm just saying it's not the first thing I would think about to be like, I could really just DIY. I think I could put this one together. I mean,
I
God
mean
bless him.
I get what you're saying, Marcelo, but on the other hand, it is just balloons in a bucket. So,
When you say it like that, I still don't want to do it.
oh, I don't want to do it either.
I want to do it even
Uh,
less now, even if it's professional. It's just a balloon in a bucket.
like I remember I had a friend help me change my brakes, and I was going down Texas Street in San Diego, and I remember thinking, I'm like, I don't know if I should have been the one to change these brakes,
Yeah, I've done that before.
but it worked out. I'm
Yeah,
still here.
you're still here. Got there on time.
All right, so using the skills he had developed over the years working odd jobs, Leonard began slowly turning the barren hillside above his camp into a 50-foot high technicolor, techno-colored message of God that would become known as Salvation Mountain. He started out by mixing clay from the hillside, adding straw and water to make adobe. Using the mix and things donated to him or junk he would himself find and fill in large spaces or provide support, to kind of build up the structure like you can see here.
Hmm.
Um,
Who's
after
that?
he had,
Oh, is that him in the picture?
yes, I think it is. It's hard to
Oh,
tell,
okay.
but looking at his face, it does look like him.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Proce-
you're good. You're good. So, he after he gets this foundation, he starts to paint his new canvas, and he turns this hillside into a multicolored, almost psychedelic monument. And he put "God is love," Leonard's mantra and the sinner's prayer. Jesus, I'm a sinner. Please come upon my body and into my heart. As the years passed, the mountain grew to 40, 50, and then around 60 feet high. And in the fourth year of the project, though, a rainstorm caused the top heavy mountain to collapse, destroying about two-thirds of his project. Leonard didn't
Oh
let the
no.
act, yeah, not
Damn, that's
great.
heartbreaking.
It really is.
Leonard didn't let the act of nature deter him from learning from his mistakes, and he built the mountain up again, this time keeping it slightly shorter to ensure stability. This design works, and the monument has since stood for 2 decades, as of now at over 50 feet tall and 100 feet wide. If one sees Salvation Mountain, like Marcella was alluding to earlier, it's not something they soon forget. So this picture is actually when I first saw it back when I was 21, maybe the second time I saw it. But I think Kevin's actually one of the guys on the hills. But yeah, those are my friends up on top of the hills that kind of show you perspective. That was back when Leonard would take you up there.
Oh, wow. I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I got there after the Leonard tours.
so I mean, you guys are both kind of creative people. What was your first impression on when you first saw Salvation Mountain, Jess?
I mean, I've never been there in person, but just by looking at the pictures, it is amazing that all of that was done by just one person.
Yeah, yeah. Having seen it in person, it was really like something to just kind of like behold and like see this whole thing. And oddly, like for like as big as it looks, like when you see it in person, it's kind of it's I mean it's big, it's large, but it's like I don't know, like when I looked at it, there was almost like a frailty to it. Like I was like, wow, this is so cool that it's out here in the desert and it's like still holding on, it's still like in one piece for the most part, you know? Like there was
Yeah.
some that to me like made me really appreciate it because I was like, this thing is holding on for as long as it is and it's only here for as long as it will be. It's really cool. It was very it was something to see.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another thing that is so impressive is just not just the fact that it's held up so well and it was done by just one person, but the fact that it's holding up well in the middle of the desert.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we'll kind of go into kind of what that took for it to hold up well like that. So in 1994, the county did try to remove the monument, stating that it was toxic to the environment. However, the slabbers, what I call Slab City residents, and others rallied around Leonard, and they got the fund to do their own toxicology test done, and it actually concluded that Salvation Mountain posed no threat to the environment. So, I'm thinking it was probably like a NIMBY thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to work in a paint store and like there is some pretty gross paint, some pretty terrible stuff. But I mean, I imagine if it was all like latex based, like it's yeah, just a bunch of rubber out in the middle of the desert.
But since it didn't get demolished from the state by the county, I should say, people began to take notice of Salvation Mountain, and tourists did start to show up to see it. And with them, donations of paint and business opportunities for those living in the slabs came. In fact, the monument has provided a much needed boost to the small rural community in the area that had its moment in the sun over half a century ago. So I actually, like I kind of alluded to before, I'd actually met Leonard a few times years ago on my 20th birthday. After a night of heavy drinking next to a bonfire, I had a chance to meet Leonard Knight, and I must say he was one of the friendliest, happiest people I've ever met. Even though my friends and I looked like the male leads from Breakfast Club hungover after sleeping in dirt, he gave no judgment and so much of his time telling us the story, giving us a tour of his camp, and showing us the colorful converted truck that he used as his sleeping quarters. I think I got a picture of that. Oh, so that's just some of the pictures I took while he was giving me the tour. And there was a sleeping quarters, and I
Oh, that's
believe you probably
cool.
saw that, Marcelo.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So so is that a Bible verse on the front bumper from the book of John?
Yes, I believe it's John 3:16.
Ah, gotcha. All I see is John, but I figured it had to be something along the lines of that. That's still really cool though. And again, impressive that it was all done by one person in the middle of the desert and that it held up as well as it did.
Yeah, real, yeah, show like dedication to his art or
Yeah.
belief or whatever.
And his whole camp had no running water, and he would bathe in the mineral sorry, the hot springs near Slab City. But yeah, he showed us his camp. He gave us a tour of Salvation Mountain, giving us details and backgrounds on some of the smaller details of his project. He actually gave my friends and I a puzzle with Salvation Mountain on it. I don't remember him charging us. If he did, it wasn't that much because none of us made any money back then. Um, I After our tour, we said our goodbye and we went back to our so-called camp. I would actually go back a few times to see him. Donate a can of paint if I could remember. Each time he was just as happy as kind as the first time we met. So this is one of the rare times in this podcast where I'll have I would have had the ability to have interacted with the subject. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
seeing the stuff that he left behind. Like clearly, he was a very like unique individual that's gonna, he's part of Western history now. Like on a smaller
Absolutely.
scale, but like he is.
And
Absolutely.
there's a picture you can see it from a distance with the rest of the mountain kind of the hill kind of in the background.
Hmm.
So um, he added to the mountain in 1998 with an experimental Hogan. Um, this is a 10-foot dome adobe structure made to shelter from the desert heat that can sometimes reach anywhere from 115 to 40 or 46 Celsius. I've been in there and it does keep things nice and cool. He also built what looks to me like a multicolored forest room he called the museum. And it further displays his talent for reusing materials to create a semi immersive, dreamlike atmosphere. I think I have, there we go. So
Wow.
there's a part of the
Oh,
museum he's
wow.
working on.
That's amazing.
And this is the Hogan. So this is the dome you could kind of sit in and take some a breather from the heat.
Yeah, I
That's
remember when we got
awesome.
there, it was like blocked off, but I remember we could just like look in there and see, and it was like, yeah, it was a lot nicer in there than it was outside.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I remember once I visited Leonard out there, and it was super hot, so we were just kind of hanging in the shade, and we both fell asleep. I was like on a hammock. Probably take that out. Sounds weird.
I mean, only as weird as you want it to be.
That wasn't weird. We were just tired, and it was hot.
Well, I'm gonna make it weird now.
Right. This is gonna be a heavy
The
edit episode for
You
me.
led me into this weird.
Leonard and his work was not only beloved by his fellow slabbers and those thousands who made the trip to see his monument, some like me even getting the opportunity to interact with the artist, he and his work also began to get worldwide recognition. In 2001, it was given a status um, as a national folk art site by the Folk Art Society of America, go figure. In 2002, the U.S. Congress granted it status of national treasure. Nick Cage,
Wow.
Nick Cage joke here.
Nick Cage.
I didn't even land any of that.
Nick Cage crawled upside down into uh the mountain and then took a diamond that he had hidden in there.
I like it. We need to get. I Nick Cage would love Slab City.
I bet you he
I
owns
think he
property there.
would.
I bet you he has a spot there that we don't even know about that he just goes in like weekends. He's like, you know what? Need to get into my grime.
Speaking of which, soon media outlets took interest in the mountain, appearing first in on local public access traveling shows in the mid '90s, such as California's Gold. Salvation Mountain would go on to be the subject of many, it'd be in many documentaries, including Plagues and Pleasures of the Salton Sea, narrated by the one and
Hmm.
only John Waters.
John Waters, the hero.
And in the Not a Hero, Sean Penn's movie version of Into the Wild, Leonard shares the screen with Christian Stewart and Emil Hirsch, yes. Now, I haven't seen these documentaries. I would like to, but there's actually two documentaries about Leonard. The first of which is Patrick Ria's 2013 The Love Story of Leonard Knight, and another one, Andrew Blake Doyle's 2015 Leonard Knight, A Man in His Mountain. To add to this, it has been the subject of publications worldwide, blogs, and amateur podcasts all over the internet.
Hmm.
Um, he's
Like
never
us.
let he's never let any of the fame really get. He never let any of the fame get to his head. He was always the same Leonard. Um, he did get a lot of joy in the fact that the more publicity the project got, the more people would his message would reach, and the more people would make the trip to visit him and his neighbors in Slab City. So he was really into giving back to that community that he did truly love.
It's great. Man that kept giving back.
So,
Absolutely.
so unfortunately, he so unfortunately we have to talk about his final years now. Um, but he did live a long, good life doing what he wanted. He spent as much time as he could before having to relocate in a long-term care facility in nearby El Cajon, California. As his health deteriorated, his family and friends formed the SalvationMountain.org, a nonprofit that was created to preserve Salvation Mountain and the memory of Leonard. In February of 2014, Leonard Knight passed this plane into the next. Today, salvation.mountain.org still takes on the care and maintenance of Leonard's dream. I will of course be putting a link to their website in the show notes. So if you ever find yourself near Nyland, California, have the afternoon to kill, go out and support the good people at salvationmountain.org. And yeah, that's the story of Leonard Knight and Salvation Mountain.
Wow. What an
Great
amazing
man.
person.
Really wish I could admit, like seeing his work was awesome, but like yeah, hearing the stories you told me about like getting to meet him with like your buddies and everything, like that's cool, man. That's a really unique experience.
Yeah, and it was, and it's something that left an impact on me, and I always kept that in the back of my head as far as like you if there's something you want to do, you should go for it. And it might not work out the way, you saw that it was going to work out. But if you keep pushing for it, you'll get to do what you need to do. Or at least that's what we can hope for, right? So I don't know.
Yeah,
I like the story a lot.
I do too.
me too.
But that is the podcast. Did we want to go ahead and say goodbye to our lovely audience?
If we must.
I
Okay.
guess.
I don't want to either. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to Fault Summits. We do have a lot of socials out there. We can be found at Fault Summits anywhere we're at. And if we're not there, we're not there. We're working on it. You can email us. The link is in the show notes. We would love to hear from you. Uh, Go ahead, leave us a 5-star review, 4-star maybe even. Yeah. Let us know what you think. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of whatever kind of day you're having. And as always, keep climbing.
Till next time, lovely.
And take a hike.